Welcome back to the deep dive. We are back in the stack. And today we have a set of documents that, frankly, read less like a syllabus and more like a hostile takeover of the future labor market.
That's a good way to put it.
But before we get into the machinery of it all, I have to mention that this deep dive is brought to you by AI Opportune.
Yeah, and the landscape is moving so incredibly fast right now. If you're trying to actually track the signal through all the noise and, avoid just getting buried in hype AI, Opportune is really the premier destination.
Absolutely.
You really need to be subscribing if you want to keep your finger on the pulse of where this industry is actually going.
Couldn't agree more. If you want to stay ahead, that is where you go. Okay, let's unpack this. So today we are looking at a partnership between Anthropic, the creators of Claude, and an organization called CodePath.
Mm-hmm.
And on the surface, the press release looks like your standard big tech helps college kids story, all warm and fuzzy. But when you actually read the documentation, the strategy papers we have...
It's a completely different animal.
It really is. The source material frames this whole thing from the perspective of 2026. And they aren't calling it charity. They're calling it an infrastructure play.
And that is the key word,
Yeah.
infrastructure. That's what we're here to unpack today. It's the AI curriculum playbook.
Right.
Because this isn't about, giving students a discount on software. This is about Anthropic embedding Claude so deeply into the computer science curriculum that it effectively becomes the operating system for how these students think.
Which is a bold, bold move. So set
Okay.
the stage for us. It's 2026. What does the educational landscape even look like in these documents? Because the numbers are staggering.
They are. The data shows the global AI education market has already crossed, $8.5 billion?
Yeah.
We're talking a 38% compound annual growth rate. So huge money is pouring in.
Okay.
But, and this is key, there's a massive disconnect that the sources identify right away.
The usage gap.
Exactly. You have 92% of university students using generative AI regularly.
So basically everyone.
Everyone.
Yeah.
If you aren't using it, you are the outlier. But then you look at the tech leaders, the people hiring these students, and only 12% report advanced AI adoption
Yeah.
beyond just basic chat.
Wait, I want to tie on that. 92% of students are using it, but the industry is lagging.
Yeah.
Usually we think of the industry being, miles ahead of academia.
Now, that's the paradox, right?
Yeah.
The students are using it, but they're using it to, let's say, survive school, not to build software.
Okay.
They're using it to summarize PDFs or, write emails. And that's what the sources call AI literacy. You know the tool exists. You know how to prompt it to get a generic answer.
Right. Write me a Python script that sorts a list. That kind of thing.
Exactly that. That is literacy. But the industry, that tiny 12% of leaders, they don't need people who can ask a chatbot a question. They need AI fluency.
Ah.
And that gap right there between literacy and fluency, that is where this Anthropic CodePath partnership is planting its flag.
Let's drill down on that distinction because it seems central to the whole thesis. What's the functional difference between an AI literate graduate and an AI fluent one?
Think of it like the difference between a consumer and an architect. AI literacy is knowing what a hammer is. It hits nails. You can poke it out.
Okay, sure. Makes sense.
AI fluency is knowing how to frame a house using that hammer.
Okay, but what does that look like in coding terms?
So in coding terms, literacy is, pasting a prompt into a window and just hoping the code runs. Fluency is orchestration.
Orchestration.
It's using an AI agent to debug a legacy code base, maybe refactor a database schema, and run automated QA tests, all while you, the human, you're acting as the project manager.
So the human stops being the bricklayer and starts being the foreman.
Precisely. And that brings us right to the first pillar of this playbook, deep integration. The sources are very, very specific here. This can't be an add-on.
Yeah, I saw that. They explicitly warn against having, AI Tuesdays or treating it as some elective. They want AI to be the operating system of the curriculum.
Which is just a fascinating concept. In the old days, 2023, you learned to code in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
It was you, a text editor, and a compiler.
Right.
And if you got stuck, you suffered for 3 hours until you finally found that missing semicolon.
I remember those days fondly. Or maybe not so fondly.
Right. But in this new program, students are using tools like Claude Code, that's Anthropic's specialized tool, from day one. They're doing project management, debugging, development with the AI.
So they aren't just learning Java or Python anymore. They're learning Claude-assisted Python.
And the productivity variance is just,
Yeah.
it's wild. The data in the report says that daily AI users in this program are merging 60% more pull requests than the non-users.
60%, that is not a marginal gain. That's like one developer doing the work of 1.5 developers.
It creates what the source calls AI native graduates. They don't know a world where they aren't collaborating with an AI.
Okay, and here's where I want your take on this. This brings up the classic fear, right? If the AI is merging the pull requests, are the students actually learning anything? Or are we just training them to be really good at pressing the tab key?
That is the big criticism, isn't it?
Yeah.
The de-skilling of the workforce. If the machine drives the car, you forget how to steer.
Exactly.
That's the fear. But the source argues the exact opposite. They claim this model actually moves education from rote memorization to enhanced reasoning.
How so?
They base this on a very specific statistic. 76% of developers do not fully trust AI-generated code.
Which, I mean, that makes sense. I wouldn't trust code I didn't write without checking it.
Exactly. And that skepticism, that's the educational lever. Because you can't trust the AI, the curriculum itself has to shift. You aren't graded on the final output anymore, because anyone can get the output.
Yeah.
You're graded on your verification method.
Show your work, but for the modern age.
It's verify your work. They call it human-in-the-loop verification. So the most valuable skill isn't writing the syntax. It's looking at what Claude produced, spotting the hallucination where it invented a library that doesn't exist.
Oh, that's interesting.
Then fixing the logic error and validating the security. You become an editor.
I like that framing. It forces the student to understand the system on a deeper level, not just the syntax. You can't spot a logic error if you don't understand the logic in the first place.
Correct. And that is a much higher level cognitive skill than just memorizing standard libraries. So, okay, we have the what AI fluency, we have the how deep integration.
Right.
Now we need to look at the who, because this is where the business strategy gets incredibly sharp.
This is the demographic piece. The sources mention they are specifically targeting community colleges, state schools, and HBCUs.
Right. And CodePath's demographic data is key here. 40% of their students come from families earning under $50,000 a year.
Huh.
Many are first-generation tech learners.
Which is a massive social impact story. I mean, you're taking the most powerful tools in the world and putting them in the hands of people who historically get access last. That's the feel-good headline.
It is. And it's true. But if you put your corporate strategist hat on for a second, it's also a ruthless defensive mode.
Walk me through that. How is helping underserved students a ruthless strategy?
It's education as distribution. Think about it. Think about customer acquisition costs. If you want to get a big enterprise to switch from OpenAI over to Anthropic, that is expensive.
Yes.
You have to fight sales battles. You have to offer discounts, do all these proof of concepts.
Right. The friction is really high.
But if you capture the student, you capture the future workforce at the source. Habit is the strongest moat there is. If these students spend 4 years learning how to orchestrate workflows, specifically in Claude, they aren't going to graduate and then suddenly decide to switch to ChatGPT. They're going to go into their first job. The boss is going to ask, what tools do we need? And they're going to say, we need Claude because that's what I know. Exactly. You are pre-installing your software in the minds of the next million developers. It is vendor lock-in, but it's happening at the syllabus level.
It's brilliant. It reminds me of what, Adobe did with creative tools or Microsoft did with Office in schools. But this feels deeper because it's not just the tool, it's the entire workflow.
That is the key distinction. You can switch word processors pretty easily, but switching an entire AI workflow where you have specific prompt libraries, specific debugging habits, specific agent orchestrations, that is so much stickier.
So Anthropic is absolutely playing the long game here. But let's look at the employer side again. We said only 12% of leaders are advanced. Are they really ready to hire these AI orchestrators?
Well, they don't really have a choice. The source includes this comparison table of skills in 2024 versus 2026, and the shift is, it's violent. It's not a gradual evolution. It's a hard pivot.
I'm looking at the table now. In 2024, the core skill is manual syntax, so typing code by hand.
Right.
In 2026, it is AI agent orchestration.
Yeah. And look at testing. In 2024, unit testing, writing little isolated tests. In 2026, AI-driven QA automation.
And productivity. It shifts from manual debugging, which is just staring at code until your eyes bleed, to prompt-based refactoring.
That's the one that stood out to me, prompt-based refactoring. I mean, if you go into an interview in 2026 and say, I am really good at manually hunting for bugs, it's like showing up to a construction site and saying, I'm really good at digging holes with a spoon.
It's artisanal maybe, but it's not scalable.
Exactly. And the industry is already moving there. The source says 90% of Fortune 100 companies are using AI coding tools right now. So if universities keep teaching spoon digging 101, they're failing their students. The industry demands operators who can run the excavator.
This fundamentally changes the whole definition of a programmer.
Right.
It seems like the barrier to entry for writing code is hitting zero, but the barrier to entry for building systems might actually be getting higher.
I think that's exactly the right read, because the systems themselves are getting more complex. If you have agents doing the coding, you can build much larger, more intricate software with fewer people.
Okay.
But that means the human in the loop has to understand architecture, security, and logic at a much, much deeper level.
Which leads us perfectly to the final pillar of this playbook. Because if you have these powerful autonomous agents running around your code base, things can go very wrong very fast.
Step 5, ethics and governance. And I know, usually this is the part of the deep dive where listeners kind of tune out because ethics sounds like a compliance seminar.
Yeah, like, please sign this form saying you promise not to be evil.
Right. But in this curriculum, ethics is not a seminar. It's treated as critical infrastructure. The source says you cannot treat governance as an afterthought when the AI is the one writing the code.
So what does that practically look like in a classroom? Are they reading philosophy?
No. They're debugging bias. They're training students to identify algorithmic prejudice in the code as it is being generated.
Oh, that's interesting. So if the AI suggests a function that inadvertently excludes a certain data set or a demographic, the student's job is to spot that.
Exactly. It's technical ethics.
Yeah.
They're also teaching them how to navigate legal frameworks like GDPR and the EU AI Act directly within the development cycle.
That is huge. I mean, usually developers build something and then the legal team comes in at the very end and says, yeah, you can't do that, tear it all down.
Which is incredibly expensive and slow.
Yeah.
If you train the developer to be compliance aware from the very first line of code, you save millions. And maybe the most critical skill they mention is explainable AI.
Explainable AI. Okay, break that down.
It is the opposite of the black box. If you're an orchestrator, you can't just say, well, the AI did it. You need to build systems that can explain why they made a decision.
Right.
If your AI agent denies a loan application or flags a user for fraud, you need to be able to trace the logic.
So the students are learning to build transparency tools into the AI agents they're managing.
Exactly. Because in a regulated world, the robot did it is not a legal defense.
So when we zoom out and look at this entire playbook as a whole, I mean, this isn't just about teaching kids to code. This is a complete restructuring of the talent pipeline.
It is. The synthesis here really is that tool preference is the new strategic mode. Anthropic realizes the battle isn't won in the boardroom. It's won in the classroom.
Yeah.
If you train a student on Claude 4, they carry that entire ecosystem, the prompt libraries, the trust, the muscle memory, straight into their career.
And for a startup or an enterprise that's hiring these kids,
It's a massive efficiency hack. You get access to pre-trained power users. You don't have to spend 6 months teaching your new junior dev how to use your AI stack. They come in on day one, open their laptop, and just start orchestrating agents.
you're effectively outsourcing your training and onboarding to the university system.
Correct. Education is no longer just a nice-to-have philanthropic sector for these tech giants. It is the primary distribution engine for enterprise AI adoption.
That is, well, it's brilliant, and it's also a little terrifying if you aren't the one doing it.
It's the reality of the 2026 landscape.
So here's where I want to leave our listener today. We know Anthropic is making this move. We know they are embedding themselves in the very infrastructure of learning.
Right.
So here's the question I want you to mull over. If education is now the primary distribution engine for enterprise AI, what happens to the tech companies that don't have a presence in the classroom?
That is the pivotal question.
I mean, if OpenAI or Google or Meta, if they aren't in the syllabus, do they simply cease to exist for the workforce of 2027? Are they destined to lose the next generation of users before those users even write their first line of code?
If you miss the classroom, you might just miss the entire market.
Something to think about the next time you see a sponsored by logo on a university website. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.
We will catch you in the next one.